Sir.
Utah is in the process right now of demanding sovereignty over its federal public lands, a process we call here House Bill 148. Could eventually lead to a lawsuit over the issue. Does that issue preclude cooperation with the federal government over other issues such as land swaps or energy permitting or things of that kind?
I understand that issue is actually in active litigation, so I can't talk about it specifically. So if you want to reframe your question that doesn't deal with the Utah action, I'm happy to take it in a broader context, but there is active litigation. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead and ask it. Ask me a question in that context.
Well, having an effort underway to regain control of the federal land in places like Utah. I know that the Utah folks are talking to other states about doing something similar. How does that affect the kind of dialogue you talked about having with states in your speech today?
You know, the lands are set aside many, many years ago within these states for oversight by the federal government. I think one of the points that I made in there is that just because federal land may be under the jurisdiction of the federal government doesn't mean that the states don't benefit from it. There are offsets to the states in terms of, for example, a share in the mineral revenues, so oil and gas revenues in states. So when there is development on federal lands, which is for the benefit of all American people, it is also directly benefiting those states. There also is offsetting payments. I talked about PILT, which is a mechanism to provide money back into local communities. But if you take many of the communities here in Utah, like the one we're standing in right now, Park City benefits because it is, in many cases, in a ski resort that is on federal land, and it may also be on private land. It is leased, it's benefiting local communities. Obviously, Park City exists because of the recreational opportunities that are around it. So whether it's on federal lands, there is great benefit that comes to local communities. And I think that that's a point that we need to make, is that it's not negative necessarily to be federal, and some of the comments suggest that. In many cases, if you go to the east where I'm now living, people would kill to have federal lands like the beautiful federal lands we have out west over there to drive the kind of tourism and recreation and visibility to their states that we have out here. So I think we need to work together and not at cross purposes. And I had a great meeting with the governors on habitat management around issues such as the sage grouse. And it's a great illustration of the federal family, the state family, tribes, all coming together with local communities to figure out how we can manage these assets for the long term. And I think that's what's in everybody's best interest. Sorry, I need to jump to somebody else. Yes, sir.
Perhaps a little more directly. Is there any appetite by the federal government to comply with the request to extinguish title to some of these federal lands and allow them to be turned over to state control?
I would say that there is appetite in the federal government to work with state governments to more thoughtfully manage our land. So in the West, you have a checkerboard. You have the situation where you have a square mile that is maybe private or maybe state and a square mile that may be federal. That's a very, very difficult way to manage lands. And so there are a number of active discussions that we have of transactions of swaps between the state government and the federal government, or where the federal government may be buying in-holdings, for example, within a national park, or we're working cooperatively together so that we can have contiguous landscapes that are more conducive to whatever their purpose is. So we're certainly working with states and willing to look at those kinds of opportunities.
Just your thoughts on the use of changing direction a little bit. The state of Utah felt very blindsided during President Clinton's administration with the signing of the Grand Staircase Monument with no contact with the state. And again, the citizens of the state were very concerned about what has been discussed with the greater monument area around Moab. They, quite frankly, are very concerned that your department or the president will go ahead and sign an 11th hour monument that will primarily what the Red Rock Wilderness Bill was trying to provide. What are your thoughts or your position on it? Do you have any comment to make to that issue?
Absolutely. I spoke to this in my confirmation hearing at some length, and it has come up repeatedly with my discussions with senators largely from the West and members of the House as well. I committed in that process that we would engage local communities, that we would listen to people on the ground about what they want for the lands around their areas. What are the special places that they feel strongly need to be conserved? What are the areas that have high potential for development? How can we take all that input into account before we make any decisions? And I committed to them that I would do that, and I stand by that commitment. We will engage local communities before any kinds of decisions are made.
Follow up to that, Congressman Bishop is sponsoring legislation that would require a full NEPA analysis before any new monument could be designated. Is that something you'd support?
I haven't seen the proposed legislation from Congressman Bishop, so I need to examine it more fully. I don't know the circumstances behind that, but I'll certainly look into that. You had a question, sir?
It's also seeking rights of way over thousands of miles of roads crisscrossing federal lands. Do you see those as a threat to the lands agencies and the way they manage the lands? And do you feel like the Interior Department is prepared to defend those in court if need be?
Again, I think everything's going to come down to specifics. I do know that what people define as roads is different. There are certainly laws that govern some of those things. When there is a road, there are different activities around the road that impact habitat, and we need to look at all those things. So I think it's going to have to be on a specific case-by-case basis. There's certainly not one-size-fits-all when it comes to roads, and so as there are specifics that come up, we'll look at it on that basis, and there may be a legitimate need to have a road through an area, and there may be a legitimate need to not have any kind of traffic through an area, and that's the way we have to look at it.